Hi, I'm live. This is Jenny with Crime Crashers. I think there's probably a slight delay, so I'm hoping everything is going well with Facebook showing up with the live stream. And I am hoping that you guys can knock me over a comment either in the Facebook stream comment area or on YouTube in the comment section so that I know you're there watching. So tonight's a little different because it's just going to be me, and we've kind of lost our crowd here. Um, and so it's going to be a little bit lonely. So I'm hoping you guys keep me company and include comments and thoughts. Tonight's kind of a little juicy on the topics. The we titled it "Rumors and Relationships" for a reason. And we're going to dive into that a little bit and what it's like in the Greenbelt scene. And but first, I'm going to do my handy little intro video. So sit back and enjoy. We are crime crashers. We challenge the code of silence that keeps witnesses from coming forward. We push law enforcement to solve these crimes. Our goal is to give a voice to victims and bring justice to unsolved cases. Join us as we take this journey into crime and justice by crashing through the barriers with the Crime Crashers. That was fun. Okay. So I just wrote in the comment section, is anyone there? I'm hoping that people are watching, that everything went smoothly for the Facebook check-in. So I'm just taking a quick peek at that to see if everything worked out okay. Because it's a little quiet today. It's raining. You guys should all be home. Hopefully there's people there. Oh, I'm seeing comments. Hi, Benjamin. Hi, Jill. Hi, Caitlin. So glad you guys are here. You have no idea. Hi, Carrie. So like I mentioned, I'm the only one here today. My light's a little weird, not my usual setup because we're doing some work in the house. So bear with me on that. So I'm going to jump into it. This is kind of an interesting one, and I'm sure there'll be some people watching that have some thoughts and feelings about what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to try to, be responsible and considerate to the various parties that may be involved. So I'm going to go ahead and do my little handy slideshow. I'm going to kind of take it and leave it at different times, and we'll just go through this and talk about it. But I'm going to be looking at your comments, so please jump in and say stuff as you go. As you know, I'm Jenny. I'm with Crime Crashers, and for the last 6 episodes before now, you've seen me with other people, and tonight it's just me. As you guys know, the woman who has been running Justice for Julie for many years and has been a very strong and solid advocate for the cause, needed to make her exit on running this. And she has passed the torch to Benjamin, who is a cousin of Julie Ferguson. And he's been really helping with it and keeping it moving. He's been working with the detectives and just staying involved in general. So I think he'll be a good person to run things. And, Julie Ferguson had a lot of good friends who are here today. And, for the other Julie who was helping me, she's done a fabulous job, and I totally understand where she's at. This is grueling and it's difficult and it's been ongoing, and we're up against a lot. We all have strong feelings that it's somebody that knew Julie, and that gets very personal. There's a very tight-knit group in Greenbelt, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about. First, the Justice for Julie website is there. The Facebook page is Give Julie Justice, so please check those out. follow or like if you're not already on there. And so, oh, we got people looking for people. So, just some brief case updates. There's been a lot of activity, and I'm probably not going to go into every single detail because there's a lot of stuff that's just sort of bits and pieces, and I'm definitely not privy to a lot of what's going on there, as you would imagine. But I have been informed that DNA is being processed. They're working with the labs on this, and that's a big step because while I think there's been past efforts, the technology has changed a lot. And there were some significant technologies in the past, 5 years even. But with COVID, everything kind of slowed down, and there's some warming back up of things, and I'm hoping that that really brings things forward. Um, when I say there's key information being sought, I mean, I can tell that the detectives are really working on this. They're looking things up, they're connecting dots, they are sort of assembling information and reviewing old information. One of the things that we posted about is that they were at a convention and they talked about Julie Ferguson's case and tried to get some feedback from other detectives on what more they could do. And I think that's what really brought forward this new lab opportunity where they have some really forward thinking, forward uh, advanced technology. Sorry. And they've also been talking to old witnesses and gathering new information from the old witnesses. And some new witnesses have come forward in all of this. And I know we've been quiet for a while, but there's still movement, and there's still a lot of things to work on. Sometimes you get a whole bunch of information. It just takes a long time to go through it all and to really find out what you need to. But the detectives are just continuously chipping away at it, and they have a pretty busy plate full of things. But this is getting their attention, and they're really gaining familiarity with everything that's been going on, and that's huge because it means it's in the spotlight for them. So thank you to Detective Bernie and crew for all that you're doing. So I'm going to dive right into this. For anyone who's paying any attention on Facebook, the elephant in the room is that one of the people who joined in on Crime Crashers has gone and gotten engaged to one of the suspects in the case. So this was announced on Facebook by that person. I'm not going to specifically name names, but I want to talk. Is there a weird sound happening? I don't know if there's a weird sound happening. Anyhow, this is kind of an upsetting and difficult topic for me personally because, it's a very unexpected twist, and I did not intend to, I couldn't have anticipated this outcome, but, having that person, join us for the show, it was not someone that I knew personally. It was someone who was a friend of Julie's, and, she has her reasons and her feelings for her choices in life, and, it is her life to choose. It's very fast, and, it brings up kind of a lot of feelings about, women who fall for men who are violent. And I think there's no mistake about it if you're in prison for 2 counts of murder that you've committed violence. And so, I know that there's people on the chat who, on the Facebook streaming, who have opinions or feelings about this too. And, I'm trying to keep it pretty straightforward. This is somebody, the person who is in jail, somebody who I think was heavily involved in rumors, was mentioned on a previous show with the Paula Zahn show. And if you're there, can you message? I'm not sure if I'm having a glitch. Anyhow, so with that person who was mentioned as a suspect, an alleged suspect. That was Noel Smith. And I'm only mentioning his name because it's already been publicized. And the police are the ones who shared that name. Um, there's some thumping. Okay, that's probably my hand. I'll try to be careful. Um, so we were communicating with him in hopes of learning some things, and it was a tough decision to communicate with someone um, who is, you know, has a history of being dangerous for certain people. Maybe not for everyone. I'm not here to say, but and I guess they connected, and you know, things happened. So she will not be involved in the case. Uh, this info is not helpful to the case, only causing problems. I'm not really sure what Misty is saying. Yeah, no, it's actually not helpful to the case. It's actually embarrassing to me personally that someone who was involved and stuff like that is, kind of went in this direction. But it, you know, where it is relevant to the case is we still have the police investigating things and wanting to find out, and he's on their list. That's, that makes it a little bit awkward with the information that she was privy to. Um, so anyhow, but I want to move on from that and just talk in general about, you know, women from our past who have had relationships with men who were violent towards them or towards others. I think that was very prevalent um, amongst different people in the group. Not everybody, thank goodness. And, I truly believe that in this case, that there are relationships that, whether it be a male female love relationship or a friendship or some form of loyalty, that may have affected the outcomes of this case. And one of the things that I've dealt with a lot, I've talked to a lot of different people about different things, and some people are more forthcoming than others. There's some who clearly are shut down, don't want to share. Maybe they know something. I'm not sure why they're so defensive, but those loyalties run kind of deep. And I think that, that there are people who are probably watching or involved, and those people are, let's just put this comment up. Uh, yes, it's problematic because they have had access to private information. We've removed all that access, but that is a concern. Um, so, with those relationships that existed all those years ago. Some people are still in touch and some people are not. And of those people, there's some loyalties that still exist. There's just a mindset that exists. And um, kind of what happens when I talk to people is they have their idea of who did it or a small list of people who they think did it. We recently found out that one of the people that several different people thought could have been involved, that might have been one of the black males described, is not possibly a suspect. Turns out that his prior incarceration pretty much absolved him from this particular case. So he was locked up during the time that this murder took place. And, this isn't a name that's been publicized, but it's somebody that's been floated around in the he said, she said. And so one of the things I want to talk to people about is thinking through, like, how could you separate out fact from fiction? How can you take what's a rumor, what someone told you that someone said over here at this time? How do you take all that, wipe it away, and think, what do I actually know? And how can I find out what I know? One of the reasons we bring the car back up a lot is because that's something that we've had at the scene all this time. We bring up the witness descriptions because that's something that we've had all this time. And maybe that is something that triggers a memory. But there could be a detail that's off. We're talking about eyewitnesses and things like that. So, the, you know, one of the things that pretty much happens when there's the rumor mill is that it fixates on one potential outcome and maybe misses something else. So, one of the things that I'm asking people to do that were involved in the Greenbelt crowd is to really shed away what they've heard, what they think they've heard, and think about what do they know. And, you know, it might not seem important to you, but if it's a tiny little, teeny little fact that, something that is tangible, that you experienced or witnessed, um, ties them to the case in some way. They were here on this night, they stopped by, and they did this, and it was suspicious. They fit the description of like, doesn't mean they're the one who did it, but if they fit the description, be willing to come forward. Don't come to me if you don't want to. Go to the police and just say that description sounds an awful lot like so and so. Instead of trying to fit who you want it to be to the description, think about what is this describing and who does that remind me of? And like I said, there could be some minor details that are wrong about it. And, like if it says that they're 6 feet tall, maybe they were 5'11", or maybe they were 6'2". It's really hard to judge someone's height as you're strolling by them. So things that you can focus on are the cars, the witness descriptions, and Julie's life events prior to the murder. We'll get into that a little bit more later, but I have not been able to do a timeline. It's, I really thought that there'd be more people who would say, oh, yeah, the last time I saw Julie was this day. Because when you lose someone, you really think about the last time you spent with them. And I haven't really gotten a whole lot of that yet, so I'm really hoping to get more of that because that might be relevant. So I'm probably doing the thumping thing again. Sorry, I keep putting my hand down. I want to talk about the threats, safety, for someone who's involved in this, and probably one of the reasons why it's worrisome to be out here, putting your face out here and talking about it. I know it was uncomfortable for Julie with the Justice for Julie page. Is that there is this feeling of, am I safe doing this? Is it comfortable doing this? And I've said it before, but there is strength in numbers. Anyone and everyone who comes forward, no one person, unless you were the person who was right there watching the crime happen, no one person is going to, well, and even then, you need corroborating evidence. There's no one person that's going to solve this case. It's going to take bits and pieces from everyone. And so at some point, if everyone steps up, then we're not so alone. And I do feel like it's easy to feel alone in this when you're sticking your neck out. So I just wanted to share that. Whoever did this to Julie, and remember who Julie was, are not your friends, no matter what you thought they were. I think that's a really important thing to say because, and I'll talk a little bit more about the loyalties thing, but we all knew each other through some channel. Pretty much every name of every person that I've talked to almost has been someone I know through someone. And I'm sure it's really hard to change how you think about people that might be involved. And that's why I'm talking about those relationships, protecting people who do violent things. This is a violence against a woman case, Is there a man in your life who fits the description or was in your life who commits violence against women? That's something to think about. The other thing is the defamation thing. With defamation, it seems easy. Someone saying something about me that I don't like. And this is specifically for people who may be watching this not liking what I'm saying. The truth is not defamation. You cannot win a defamation lawsuit if someone is speaking the truth. So my goal is to focus on truth and talk about what we know. I avoid saying names of people that that want privacy and things like that. There are some that have already been publicized, and those are the only names that I'm willing to say. But even when I say those names, I just want to be really clear that I don't necessarily think that those people did it. I mentioned Noel Smith, and I'm going to say it very clearly. I don't have any reason to think he did it other than that he had a track record clearly with other crimes. You know, if we shed away our assumptions about him and look at, okay, but where would he have been on this? What ties him to it? You know, those are the things I want you to be thinking about. Not, oh, he's a scary dude who does bad things. You know, okay, fine. But we're looking at who did this bad thing, and we don't know that it's him. So, that right there is a very clear statement that while these names are being thrown out, allegedly, this suspect, that suspect, people of interest, things like that, it doesn't, it adds up to nothing in terms of we don't necessarily think that those people did it. And so it can be actually a little bit distracting if somebody else did do it. And that's why I'm asking you to think through the information we have and who we know that fits those descriptions that might have known Julie or in any capacity. So, I talked about this a little bit. The connections we have, you hear about the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I don't think there's anyone in Greenbelt who doesn't have like a 3-degree connection, maybe even 2 degrees in the Greenbelt social scene from back then. I'm a little bit older than Julie Ferguson. I did not know her personally. But I'm always surprised at just how many people I know from really different walks of my life that all knew her or are in some way connected to her through this case. And so one of the problems with that is it can be very uncomfortable. If it's someone you know or thought you knew or someone that if you feel uncomfortable coming forward because people are going to judge you, the police don't tell us who talks to them. I can tell you that much. Unless we are the ones that said, hey, talk to this person, they have something to tell you. I have no clue who they're talking to. And, Detective Bernie, I actually have a lot of respect for him with what he's doing and how he does things. It's not perfect. Cold cases aren't perfect. There's so many of them. So the fact that he's putting the attention and time into this one is really incredible. But it also means that there's information that's got him interested. But he will take your calls. He will listen to what you have to say, and no one will have to know. And it might not be something that's admissible in court, and I've said that before, but you have to be willing to break down your loyalties from 30 years ago. I think a lot of people still carry that feeling of protecting people from back then. As Benjamin says, we're here to just know who did it and why. After almost 29 years, this needs to stop. There are people who never receive justice. I really think we can do this for Julie. I think that there's information there. There is evidence from the scene. And, I really think that they are going to use this momentum and take some steps forward that could be the difference in solving this case. And I think about that and I think, when will this end? That's funny. Benjamin, I didn't know when I put your comment up there that my next slide was going to say, when will it end? And, that is an important question. I mean, we're staring down the barrel of 30 years of this next, this is 2025, but, that time can come really fast. We could still be processing all the evidence that we're currently dealing with in a year from now. So I talked a lot about the vast majority of women. The vast majority of people sticking their necks out are women. And, I want the men who are watching, I first want to start off by saying thank you to the men who have shown up. And there's a number that have really shown that they care more about justice and protecting Julie than about, any other factor. There are people who, just are, trying to do the best they can with it. There's a lot of defensive people, and who, I don't know why. I can't say that it's because they know something, but it definitely raises alarm bells with me. I think it's, pretty honest and an open thing to want to explore if you're sitting in the right position and looking at it from the right angle. Especially if you knew a lot of people that kind of could have been involved or would have been kind of doing dumb stuff back then. And maybe you're one of them and you just haven't changed the way you think about it. But so for the women out there who have spoken up, thank you so much for that. But there's still more that I think know stuff or, um, see the descriptions and recognize them, or are aware that somebody had some involvement or said something, or um, just in some way relates back to the case. And, I just want to remind you that the abuse of women is at the heart of this case. And whoever did this was overpowering Julie. They were being abusive towards her. They may not have taken her to, this in the car and gone over to this private location to kill her. But at the end of the day, that's what they did. And, that's something to think about. There are people that are, how do I put it? There are people who I know were abused by somebody who aren't willing to, who say, oh, that person, would never do such a thing. And it's interesting to me because I already know that they would and have. And, if you were a victim of abuse and it was someone in that group and they fit the description, or they might have a piece of information, or you're aware of a car they drive, I think we're like, way more advanced now in how we think about what these things really are. And Julie was not safe that night. That much is clear. And she should have been. And I think that until we stand up for, her and women in her position, you see the news all the time now. Women, go missing, and someone has to stand up for them. So to the men who have stood up, thank you. To the women who have stood up, thank you. And I really want you guys to think about protecting a girl. I mean, if you have children, especially if you have a daughter, but even if you have a son, that she was a girl, and we are older adults now. It's time to make a difference. And I really feel like there are people who have information that aren't speaking. Even if it's just you hung out with her the weekend before, I want to know that. I'd love to know where she was at, what she was doing, who she was hanging out with. We know about school. So, we can assume that for the most part she went to school. But if she skipped school one day and hung out somewhere, you're like, yeah, last time I saw Julie was skipping school. That's cool. Um, and, one of the things we've talked about before is snitches get stitches and stuff like that. So I just have a little fun with the pictures. Um, so I'm going to show this actually while we're at it. I think a lot of it isn't just necessarily loyalty that binds, but fear, because a lot of us either know or knew all of those people and crew back in the day. So it's possibly part loyalty for some, but also some great fear. That's a very true statement. And, I'm not just some stranger, really. I'm somebody who hung out down there. People know who I am. And I'm not going to lie, it doesn't feel comfortable being out here. And that's why I say, until we overcome that fear and kind of get pissed off that we are made to live in fear of something we might know, that, you know, we're just always going to sit here worried about it. I do think there's people who know stuff who are just scared to death to say something. Um, and I think that the detectives care more about someone just coming and telling them stuff. Just if they were harboring information, if they helped someone hide something, if, you know, um, they knew something all this time and didn't come forward, there's no judgment in that. I do understand the fear, and it's not comfortable at all. So, hi, Teresa. Um, so that's an interesting concept to think about with the loyalty versus the fear. And if you're somebody who it's more about the fear, um, I don't know if there's anything I'll say to you during this that will change your mind. I don't think there's anything else. I don't know if the loyalty thing can be changed. Um, but just know that you're not alone. I'm right here. Everyone can see my face. And, I'm not a witness to anything personally, but I am very front and center. And, but you're not alone. There's a lot of people who have come forward with different little pieces of the puzzle, and it all really helps. And, if it's your child, um, you know, I think you would beg and plead for people to come forward and not be afraid. And, and at some point, if there's a retaliation, if there's a reaction to or retaliation, how many people can they retaliate against? If 20 people come forward, what are they going to do? You know, I think we need to move on from that. I would like to, anyways. And now I've got a little problem because I don't know how to remove this comment. Here we go. And the question is, who else have they hurt? We don't know. That's the other thing. We don't know. Is Julie the only person that they've done this to? We don't know if maybe she was, and they've gone on and lived a perfectly clean and wonderful life. We don't know. Um, but it's definitely something that you have to think about when you have this information. So I'm gonna just keep going. I'm gonna just reiterate the eyewitness information since I talk about that being relevant. And 6 out of 8 of the witnesses saw a red, boxy, older, dark red, red or maroon car that evening. It was an older model, probably from the mid 80s. Several said that it was a Jetta or looked like a Jetta. And one witness clearly describes the occupants of the vehicle that was seen in the parking lot that looked like a Jetta. So we're going to talk about that as a reminder. I did not put a picture up of the car, and here's why. I learned from the last time that people are, discerning cars, and I don't want you to necessarily assume it's a Jetta. You have strong reason to believe it's a Jetta. There's some guys who know their cars who saw it, who believed it was a Jetta, but that doesn't mean that it was. So that's something that you really need to be thinking about is, think of it without the name attached, with a red car, boxy, older model, maroon, sort of a dark red, maroon, kind of older looking car. So this picture here is not of anyone we know. I just thought it was funny because it looked like it could be people we know. I literally Googled teens from the 90s. This is a real synopsis, and I'm trying not to add every single detail because I just want you to focus on it as a whole. One of the black male suspects was around 6 feet tall and slim, dark skin tone, very clean shaven, multicolored silk shirt, female, 5'9", short hair, jeans, and a baggy jacket. And there was a second black male who was just described as a light-skinned black male. We don't have any other detail about him. So if you know someone that fits that description, I don't care if I have 100 people come to me to tell me who they think it is. I would really like you to. And not, I say to me, go to the police. Tell them who you think it is. If it's somebody who knew Julie or was in the Greenbelt crowd, or I say Greenbelt, but I'm also kind of including Lanham, Bowie, Glendale, because we know that there was a lot of interconnection there with all those groups of people. So, this is the where are they now? I can tell you that there are people who are paying attention. People are starting to reconnect with people that they talked to before, asking questions, trying to remember details. Some of this activity is definitely driving momentum and opening up more information. But there's still a lot that we don't know. And, I don't know what loyalties still exist, but that's something to think about. If you're protecting someone who you haven't talked to in 25 years, asking yourself why. If someone reaches out to you and is asking a lot of questions or whatever, maybe that's something to think about. So those are just things that I wanted to talk about specifically to do with this. I'm just seeing there's comments here. Um, uh, Teresa says, once you choose to be a good person, everything is that much easier. You're in more danger with bad people free than you are with them in jail. This is true. I think that, some of, one of the things that, I said earlier in the show is that there's somebody who has been mentioned 4 or 5 times as someone who could have been involved, who might have been, fitting a description, that kind of thing. And we were able to absolve them. They don't even know who they are because we haven't talked to them about it, of course. But it was actually a relief. It was a relief. Okay, check that one off the list. And, I'm relieved for them, because I would hate to have someone be brought up a whole bunch of times that was actually innocent. Um, and that pretty much includes any of the previously named alleged suspects. It includes people who have been named privately. I'd rather cross you off the list. But we still think it's somebody who knew her. We've talked a lot about that, about her just getting in the car and without any fight. And that's something that um, is a big deal to me, in that she's a PG County girl. Generally speaking, we're kind of tough, and we're not just like, oh, okay, let me get in the car. And it happens. But I know Julie was kind of tough. One story from recently before she passed was that she stepped in on a fight and took charge of it. And, that to defend somebody else. And, it just speaks to, the nature of her personality. She wasn't just a you know, sort of a weak pushover person. She was built kind of like what I would imagine in this area, and to just imagine her getting in a car with someone that she already knew was unsafe, um, or a stranger, it does seem like a bit of a stretch. And so that's just something to think about. Again, I really, really, really want people to share anything you did with her. It might seem minor, mundane, irrelevant. If you drove with her to or from work one day, if you stopped at a friend's house, if you were with her at the party, if you were there with this fight that I'm talking about, anything that helps us put together a timeline is important. Um, there's some information we've gotten that perhaps something occurred within a week or two before she passed that had her worried. And that's kind of why we're very curious about it. So if you can stop and think, when was the last time I, spent time with Julie? That would be really a really big deal. There are people who I would love to talk to about that, the people who were going to pick her up that night. And, I don't know how much they've shared with police, but it might help us bring together a timeline, which might help us narrow down who to talk to and ask questions to. Um, and not everybody's going to talk to us. Like I said, there's some people who won't or are defensive, but that timeline could be valuable to us. And while I am sure the police did some of that, I don't know how much they really did. I have no idea what their history is, but you guys are sort of the key to that. Um, some important details are who hung out with Julie in the 2 weeks prior to her disappearance, what parties and events did she attend, did she confide in you about anything at all? We asked the question about who she might have been buying her weed from leading up to her death. Um, we want to know who might have visited her at home or called her at home. If you've talked to her on the phone, the week before she died, anything, we would like to know. It would be really, really, really helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this and have a little bit of a chat for anybody who has any comments that they want to share. Going back to the rumors and relationships theme, the rumors people talking isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's when there's a lot of stuff that's repeated that's not based in true information. There's a lot of guessing going on. If somebody, you might be guessing on who fits a description, but definitely having more specific details about um, who she spent her time with, um, who she might have been worried about. We've had a lot of rumors about confrontations at the store she worked at relating to credit cards. And, that's been brought up in the Paula Zahn show. But I can't, there's no manager who's specifically calling out an issue. And I've talked to two managers. Um, there just didn't seem to be a specific incident that we can find where there was major credit card fraud or reporting going on at Linden's and things, or an investigation. Um, so I'm just looking at this. So there's a lot of information out there that's just kind of floating around. If anyone has concrete information, you can clarify something. That would be huge for us. There's uh, probably trying to think here of when of the people that we've talked to, you might only give us one, like 0.5% of the whole picture. But sometimes it's that little piece of the puzzle that we're like, oh shoot, well, that makes sense. So any little thing that happens, there have been times where people have talked about her being scared leading up to her death, but then it almost seemed like there there's other things that made it seem like she didn't really have much to be afraid of. She was sitting alone at that liquor store with people, crawling around. If she was truly afraid about something, would she have asked someone to sit with her? We don't know. Hold on. Can I share? So, uh, the detectives think that when they went to the convention and they went through the whole case and some of the information that was available, they all agree that they felt like the descriptions that I gave you earlier are people who would have been involved in the case. Um, they are doing interviews currently with a variety of different people that are old witnesses. There's there's still a lot we can't share. I do think that um, we have learned a little when I asked about, who sold weed to her, we have learned a bit about that, but there might be more details to it, or there might be some other source that we'd like to know about. And okay, so Anne Marie posted this. We'll deal with this one because this was definitely something that could have influenced the case. They listened to a podcast that said she was a character witness in a trial. The problem with that piece of information is she was a character witness for the defense, and there's no association that we know of at this time with her being a character witness for that trial that has anything to do with this. Um, in part because she wasn't really getting anyone locked up. It was kind of the opposite. She was helping somebody who was falsely accused. And, usually you would imagine that any retaliation would be if she was a witness for the prosecution and she was saying things that could get somebody locked up. So we don't really think that that's a reason why, but I think the problem is whenever there's a case like that, um, whenever there's a case, people hear, oh, a witness in a case that's really could lead to some sort of problems or retaliation. In this case, that's not it. And police actually found an old Greenbelt News Review article where they very quickly discarded it as a motive. Um, The credit card thing could be a motive, and it's been discussed before. Did she say something to people? Um, in the Greenbelt crowd, it was called chicken wings, and there was a lot of people involved, and so really dumb name. Um, but it was basically a lot of different people who used stolen credit cards, and maybe they were trying to get her to let them use it at the store. Um, but we don't know that that's what happened. We have people who don't think she would have been involved herself in committing any crimes associated with it. Julie, hung out with people who were, doing different things, and some were good and some weren't so good. But she herself went to school, had a job, generally seemed like she was on the right path. And so, speaking of podcasts, there's a podcast out there that kind of pulls together a lot of information. And maybe I can have Benjamin share it on the Justice for Julie page. It's like Inspector Detector or something. I forget. We'll share it. But it was interesting because they sort of stitched together information from all these different sources and compacted it into a pretty short narrative, and much shorter than what I'm able to do here. But there was details in there where I was like, wait, what? How did they know that? Was that published? And it was stuff that I didn't think was published. Pretty sure some of it was from the Crime Crasher episodes that we've done, because some of it you would only have gotten from here. So that person was doing their homework, I guess. I don't know. A complete stranger to me, but it actually made me think of things that I'd forgotten to check into. So that was kind of neat. Um, so this is an interesting comment. I think the detail of the man wearing a silk shirt is so unique. Those shirts don't exist anymore. Yeah, so that is so funny. I don't know. Are there silk shirts anymore? Can anyone let me know? Um, Back then, I do think it was a thing. And, you know, the thing that stood out to me about the description, heights can vary a little bit. Skin tone, okay, that's a perception value, but, darker skin tone. Um, the remembering that it was a multicolored silk shirt is kind of humorous to me. Um, but the clean shaven thing was also interesting because um, the the way it was described to us and in the newspaper was very clean shaven. This like and well groomed. I think they used the term well groomed. Um, oh, sorry, this is a funny comment. Multicolor means multicultural. No, sorry. That's funny. Um, no, it's legitimately multicolored, not the person in the shirt. I'm not going to be able to finish this. Um, so basically, there was like these prints back then that were so 90s that were like, you know, rad. I don't know. It was the person was one color, dark skinned black male, and the shirt was the multicolored thing. But that was great. Thank you. Um, Carrie describes mosaic style. So if next time we do one of these episodes, I'll share some pictures of silk shirts. Um, you know, there it is an interesting detail, and it's something to really to think about. Because I don't know. I mean, how do I put it? I always felt like it wasn't just the one person; it was the combination. If these people, let's just pretend that these people did go and commit this crime that were described. They got into something pretty rough together. They had to be pretty tight for no one to have come forward or anything. So they must be close in some way. And so they were there together. Maybe they ran together. And that's something to think about too. So you add in the combination of the individual descriptions and then you pull together the grouping of. And keeping in mind that females are an interesting thing back then. Um, there were women who were kind of in the mix and influential, and then there were the tag-alongs. And we don't know anything about this female in terms of what her role might have been. Um, and we don't know who stuck around, if people were dropped off or picked up. Um, so I'm sorry, there's a lot of good talk about the shirt now. Button down, loud colors and patterns, rayon silk, super popular in the 90s. Maybe a few buttons undone with like a little like necklace. One of those like leather rope necklaces, maybe. I don't know. Just making stuff up here. But yeah, that's an interesting detail. Who in Greenbelt in our age group knows someone who wore multicolored silk shirts? That was very clean shaven and well groomed. Come forward, send me a message. I would love to talk to you. So those are just funny detail. Sorry, multicolored. That was great. Um, so the other thing is that's just description of people who were there that day. Um, Within a matter of minutes before she was seen talking to somebody in the same type of car, which looked like a red Jetta. And so it's sort of triangulating information, if you will. It doesn't mean that we have, specific information on them being definitely the same people, but when you add up the different pieces of the puzzle, it definitely uh, stood out to the detectives, both years ago and today, at the convention last week, as a detail that you can't ignore. Being potentially the suspects that we're looking for. Um, so this is a fun comment. If you plan to go out to commit a crime, it seems odd to wear such a loud item of clothing. Uh, the police don't think they planned it. They think it was unplanned. They think that they used some stuff they had available just on the scene. And so there's evidence that suggests it was not a planned crime and may have just been a kind of a messed up situation that went too far. This is why I talk about men who might treat women badly, because maybe they started off thinking, okay, we're going to, threaten her or try to, shut her up because she's trying to get out. And now they're choking her. And next thing you know, she's not waking up. It's not a scenario that most people would run into. But, somebody who is comfortable exerting power and control over a woman might do so, but they didn't necessarily walk out the door that day all freshly well groomed with their multicolored silk shirt, looking to commit a crime. And, keep in mind there was a light skinned black male with him too, that wasn't seen outside of the car, so we don't have a full description other than very light skinned black male. And we don't know which one of them actually did the crime. We just, have a much more detailed description of this guy. So, so this is another comment. Marco, party shirt. These guys in the Jetta could have been about weed. So the details in the witness statement are that this person offered weed to the person who saw them as she crossed their path. So you're spot on about that. It was his party shirt. He was offering weed, and that's one of the reasons why we want to find out who was Julie's weed source. That person might have known she was working there that day, and they would have known who she was. So, it wasn't just someone who might be wanting to smoke weed, it was someone who was offering weed. And so that's a connection that we're looking for as well. So if you know who Julie got her weed from, please tell us. That would be good to know. And, like I said, it might just be one little percentage of the whole big picture. And it's certainly not something that could get you convicted of a murder, but it just continues to refine the pieces of the puzzle. And more people come forward, and you can come forward completely anonymously. On the justiceforjulie.org page, there's an anonymous tip line that goes in. Detective Bernie will not give his sources. He's very professional about that. Um, so um, it says, or maybe somebody who wanted her, but she didn't want them back and they got mad and hurt her. That is a possibility. You know, we don't know what their intention was. And we don't think that Julie got into a car with people she thought were going to kill her. She, may not have been comfortable getting in the car. She might have felt, you know, pressure to get in the car. She might have been worried that her ride wasn't showing up, so that might be her only ride. And so she let herself be convinced to get in the car. But that person could be trying to get her in the car because they were interested in spending time with her and it didn't go as planned. And they didn't get what they want out of it. So those are things that definitely, could be a scenario that played out. And we don't know, we brought up the credit card thing, the interest in her thing is a real possibility too. Again, it is a crime against a woman, and there's a power control aspect to the crime. And so somebody who would exert power and control to abuse a woman in a relationship is also the kind of person who would commit this crime. And that's why I think that relationships and your loyalties to somebody who used to abuse you or someone you know should be shattered, because they're doing it to other people, guaranteed, even if it doesn't always result in a death. Another good comment. So a darker skinned, taller black dude who sells weed, and a light skinned black dude, height unknown, in the red car that knew Julie. I think that sums it up. And, I think that anybody who recognizes this information that doesn't come forward and has, that's really unfortunate. Maybe you're watching this and you're thinking about it. Just know that you're definitely in good hands with Detective Bernie. If you're not ready to talk to police and you want to self-land it with me or with, someone that you maybe know is talking to me or something, you can. I'm not, as you know, I've only shared names of people who've already been publicly mentioned by police, and I've also said I'm not sold on the idea that those people did it. So I'm not mentioning people who are giving me information. And but obviously I'm working with the detectives, and there's certain things that help them figure out who they're dealing with. If you think you know who it is and you know something about their past or history, that's worth sharing with police. It gives them a sense of who they might be dealing with. Um, it makes it a lot less left field. So Marco says, I heard they never recovered her purse and they took 2 blunts from her pocket. So that's an interesting thing, Marco. I don't know where you heard that from, but we do know that her purse was not recovered, and we do know that she had 3 blunts and gave 1 away. So she had 2. So, I don't know if that's like from another source, but I would love to, if you have anything else you want to share, keep going. We talked about the blunts because whoever sold her weed, we thought maybe they are the ones that rolled the blunts for her when they sold it to her. So was there someone who she regularly bought weed from? We do know that she bought, periodically or regularly even. And, so the fact that they were already pre-rolled in blunts is a little bit unusual. If you know someone who sells weed, that wrapped up in blunts already, that would be also good information to know. And if that person who sells weed that wraps it up in blunts already, that wears a multicolored silk shirt, and fits the description, or if it's the lighter skinned black guy or anything. Again, that's how you bring these investigations in. You kind of triangulate the information. It's all the little details that come together. Um, Sarah says, "Do you know who sold her the blunts, um, or who sold them already rolled?" So that's basically what we're looking at here. Um, we talked a little bit before about her getting calls from people at odd hours, and her mom brought that to the attention of the police. And these are leads that the police had not up to now pursued as being meaningful, but they could be. And I think that's back in their focus, and it might help if that was somebody who was selling her weed that she was communicating with. That could bring that around. Um, it could be someone paying a little extra attention to her. I'm not really sure what that was, but we do know that it's another piece of information that the police are providing. Um, Michelle says, could it be that she got in the car to smoke with the people in the car while waiting for her ride? That's possible. Like I said, I'm imagining her sitting there. She doesn't have a ride. She's waiting for a ride. Now 20 minutes have gone by. I believe they were supposed to be there at 9:30, or thereabouts. Not a big deal except for that. Now she's been sitting there for a while. She knows these people. They're promising to just drop her off. She only lived a few minutes away. Maybe she agreed to accept the ride because she thought, okay, they're just going to drop me off at home. Or we're just going to sit in the car and smoke, and then I'll hop back out. And then once she was in the car, she couldn't get out. You know, those are all real possibilities. And uh, you know, we, we've sort of we've talked about how she could have gotten trapped in the car and what could have happened to get her stuck in there. Um, there's a lot of different things that could happen, to do that. Once she's in there and they're driving, she's not necessarily going to jump out. Once she was contained, she got tied up and didn't have really a means to get out. Um, the car was older. Were the handles working? That's a question. We don't know enough about the car. I'll tell you, the car keeps me up at night. So if anyone knows anyone who drove a red car, forget about it being a Jetta for a second. If you knew someone who drove an older red car back in the 90s, that's a possible lead. And, we want to reiterate, and we've said this before, the person who was driving the car may not be the person who owned the car. So that's just something, to keep in mind. So why are friends from that time frame being so quiet? When I was a teen, my friends and I knew each other's every move. I don't know. I actually really thought when we asked for the timeline that people would just flood us with all kinds of stupid details about how she spent her final days. It has been a long time, but we had one person who said they were going to reach out. We haven't heard the details of that, but we really haven't had a whole lot. So that's why I'm really trying to reiterate that, because we don't know who she was hanging around in the weeks leading up to her death. Renee asked, I'm sorry, did you say that someone named Jennifer may have driven the red car? No, I don't know the name of a person who drove a red car named Jennifer. There are some people who had red cars from back then that were nothing like a Jetta that, I'm aware of. But, they completely different make and model, probably would not be confused for a Jetta. So there is some of that. And who's really thinking about what cars people drove, especially if it was an old crappy car. You might remember the nice shiny ones. Marco said, because Greenbelt is not a safe city. That's an interesting one, because now that I'm out of the thick of it and I live a pretty peaceful life, I look back and I'm like, damn, we really surrounded ourselves with some bullshit, to be honest. You know, there. I mean, on the day to day, it was peaceful, but people were doing dumb stuff. The fact that we had a name for stolen credit cards and people were going around stealing stuff, you know, the fact that um, I can't think of a week in school where there wasn't at least a couple of fights. You know, they're just, you know, from I'm talking from elementary school up. I'm not talking just high school. Um, so there's a lot of weird things that happen in Greenbelt, and it's normalized when you're in it. And I think that's part of the problem is we have to start looking at this as not normal. Um, Nick says, so the people who took her to work and picked her up from work and hung out with her are silent or disinterested. I think that there, at least one person is really not speaking that I know of. The other one has done some interviews for the shows, but there's people who were there that night, directly involved with her, don't really want to speak to me, um, or not coming forward. Um, so there is some element of that. And you don't have to speak to me. That's not a requirement. Uh, but I do find that there's people who really just don't have anything to hide and just legit in their hearts they want this solved and they're willing to talk. I've had some people reach out to me that are raising my alarm bells. I feel like they're trying to derail the direction that we might be heading in, or not that we have a specific direction defined because I'm keeping all options open. But you know, there's been people who I feel like I don't know if I trust this person or what they're saying, and they might be planted by somebody else to try to derail us. So there's definitely been some of that. Speaking of, you know, rumors and relationships, there could be literally somebody covering and sending us potential suspects just to kind of point in a different direction. And how do you prove that? You don't. But you know, it's hard to know where the loyalties are and where they're not. But the people who are coming and very forthcoming, I can feel it in their heart that their intention is positive and you know they really do want to help. Um, and I think there's people who have had more run-ins with the law over the years that are more hesitant because maybe they don't have the best experience with things. You know, Detective Bernie is a really practical guy. He doesn't, you know, if somebody failed to say something 25, 30 years ago, he's not chasing you down. You know, the only, you know, crimes that could even be punishable this long later, um, due to statute of limitations is probably the murder itself. But, you know, you know, if you're involved in bad stuff now or then, he doesn't care about that. He just wants the information. He's a homicide detective. He doesn't care if you were involved in a credit card fraud. He really doesn't. You know, um, if you were in the car that night or they stopped by your place and you saw them drive away with her, you know, and you never said anything because, you know, maybe you were scared. That's something he understands completely. Um, so, you know, that's definitely a difficult one when people don't come forward or aren't willing to speak as much because it does change what we know. And those are some of the people that were the closest to her. Um, it makes it really difficult. And actually, I think for someone like Julie, who was running Justice for Julie, she, you know, was sometimes very alone in this. I kind of jumped in to be a support because I had some information from other people that could be helpful to the case. And then here I am. But I don't, you know, I don't blame her for being frustrated that people weren't jumping in more. And that's why I say thank you to those who have. And I really want to see the people who haven't. I'm not here to judge anyone, you know, at all on any of it. But coming forward and talking about what you know would be amazing. Um, so let's talk about New Greenbelt has never been safe. So that's an interesting comment. I called it Greenbelt East growing up. I lived in Old Greenbelt, And old Greenbelt is like this little like cocoon. I called it the Mayberry in the ghetto. But it still is kind of like a little like hippie Mayberry. Um, and it's a real community. And, because I lived there, that's where I hung out. I could walk to, the hangouts, and I didn't have to go other places. And I guess for that reason, I wasn't really in some of the social circles in parties that were happening in Greenbelt East. Not that I didn't find my own set of trouble, because I sure did. But but it definitely was a little bit different in terms of crime and things like that. But it's I feel like old Greenbelt felt very safe growing up. Um, but it wasn't until later that I was like, oh yeah, there were fights like almost every day at school, and oh yeah, this thing wasn't safe. And forget about going to Beltway Plaza, that was not safe. And so that, go to this comment. Jamie says, you mentioned testing DNA. When will those results begin? I don't have a when. I have no idea. I do know that these things take time. I'm learning the hard way that you have to have a shit ton of patience. And I've spent time being impatient, and it didn't really get me anywhere because I have no control. I'm like, let me go in there. I'll run this. I'll do this. I'll do that. Where are the interns? Somebody's got to do all this stuff. But they have, the detectives aren't just doing cold cases. They're helping with new cases, and some of their old cases might have hotter leads than this one, and so they're juggling all the things. What I can tell you is they're actively pursuing a number of different things with this case, and it's seeming to get more attention than I've seen it get in years. Um, Whether or not that, I mean, I think if they really, if someone wanted to fast track DNA, they could probably get it within a matter of weeks. But in this case, it's a special process and new technology, and so I have no idea. It also depends on when they actually ship it from the lab. Somebody has to probably go pull it up and do all these things, and there's always chain of custody stuff. So that being said, this is a marathon, unfortunately, not a sprint. Um, so um, I think that one of the things that the DNA, one of the cool things about the DNA, DNA is by itself just one factor in the whole thing, and how the DNA is found, and what how it can be linked to people and to the crime itself is definitely it matters, to have more than just the DNA. Somebody on one of our posts recently talked about genealogy, and that's an option, but genealogy would have to happen after we have the DNA sequences, and so they have to process the DNA, get the genetic coding, whatever it is, with you know, it's a very long strand of whatever, and they can very quickly compare it to samples that are already in their system. It's called CODIS, and most criminals now will get their blood taken, and they're able to track it down rapidly if they're already in the system by just submitting it and being like, oh, and here's a match. When the ancestry DNA comes in is when that hasn't had any leads. And then you go to something like ancestry.com, 23andMe, where people have readily volunteered to give away their DNA information to the world. And you map it. And you might, that person may or may not be in there, but maybe a second cousin is. And now you have to map it to that person, not knowing it's that person. But, you have to kind of say, okay, well, this was, their mother's side. This gene shows their mother's side is this and this. And then, kind of move through the ranks. And then once you find, okay, it could be this person, Well, how do you know it was this person? Well, they happen to live here in this place at this time. They drove this kind of car. They're so and so. Oh, and by the way, they sold weed and wore multicolored silk shirts. There's stuff like that that they would have to do to kind of bring that full circle. My hope is that on the short list of suspects that they have, or persons of interest, that somebody is either already in their CODIS system, or they can quickly rule in or rule out some of the people that that are persons of interest in this case. And again, sometimes it's just as awesome to rule somebody out. I mean, I live. I mean, it sounds weird, but I lived quite happily for a solid week on that little victory of ruling out this one person. I can't imagine. I mean, I don't. Probably a lot of people thought it was this person because they were up to no good either. Um, but at the same time, it's just one step closer. It means, okay, check next. Who else do we have to deal with? But with the DNA, that's going to be its own can of worms once they get it. Okay. So Nelson, I'm assuming we're talking Detective Bernie Nelson, told you that they were able to find the people in the Jetta. That's a good possibility. The I I know that they have people they believe were in the Jetta. I don't know if they have confirmed that. So you have to be careful how you say that. Um, they have people that um, there there is some information about people in the Jetta, and we don't know if I don't know if there's more specific stuff than that. And Marco, I don't know who you are. I'll talk to you later. But I'm very curious about the information that you're getting. Um, so Cornelia said, I think it might be helpful to map out the back way of driving from Linens and things to Daisy Lane, Hanover through Good Luck to 450 to Glendale to Daisy. I feel culprits lived near that route. Another interesting statement. We used to sort of envision it as they turned out on 193 and they just went straight shot and then turned onto Daisy Lane. Now we think there's actually multiple different ways they could have gone. And it could have been that Hanover Parkway. Uh, if you go out of Greenway Shopping Center, 193 is in front of it and Hanover's to the side of it. You could go out on 193 and turn east, or you could go on Hanover Parkway and head south and then east. And sorry for anyone who doesn't know the north, south, east, west. I've always been weird. I've always known it. But you kind of loop around that way to get to Daisy Lane. And then there's also, somebody pointed out recently, you could go up to 95, hit the ag farm, go down Beaver Dam Road, sync up with, I think, Good Luck Road and blah, blah, blah. So that was something we hadn't mapped out either. It's kind of interesting when I was like, oh, yeah, yeah. So there are different ways to get there. Beaver Dam Road is super duper obscure. So the fact that somebody would bring that one up, I thought was interesting. But I don't know which way they would have gone. What I do know, what the police suspect, is that they hung out in the car for a while and that the murder was committed in the car. Just based on the evidence at the scene, there was no reason to believe that she was killed or was in any other location, and there is reason to believe she was murdered in the car. I don't know what evidence says that. But that's something that they have reiterated over time. The Jetta was seen on Daisy Lane too, and that is correct. There's too much of a coincidence for it to not be involved in the crime. I think that's one of the things that really was reflected back to Detective Bernie. I think you can see it, but I think having other detectives take a look at all the information and say, yeah, that's some pretty telling pieces of the puzzle. You've got the car hanging out. I mean, there was multiple sightings that evening in the parking lot with this Jetta playing loud music. I thought that was an interesting detail because we do have someone who talked about a car that fit the description with a loud sound system. So if anyone knows about that, a loud sound system is a little hard to miss. Um, but so the fact that multiple people described it as sort of loud thumping music, or like a little bit earlier, like within a half an hour to an hour before um, she was abducted, that's interesting to me because that's a possibility. But the gosh, there was another detail that we talked about that there may have been a what's it called on the back where there's like a fin for aerodynamics. I forget what it's called, but anyhow, I thought that was funny because a spoiler. Thank you. Um, I thought that was funny because I my first response was, "Who puts a spoiler on the Jetta?" You know, in the realm of physics, you're not getting a race car out of a Jetta. Did you ever like whittle cars in tech ed? Um, so I'm just trying to make sure I don't miss any comments. Carrie said, I thought her keys, minus her house keys, were thrown out in the strip near the school, unless that was the way back. So I don't know about her house keys. I do know her ID was found on 193, which would have been on the way back. And, you know, seems more likely that would happen after the murder. There was some reason to believe that the people were coming back this way, or back towards Hanover Road, that kind of area. I think it was on a turn into it was Hanover. Um, I forget what the name of the road is, but so there's definitely the ID was found. The purse was not found. Um, so uh, we believe the suspects were older than Julie. We think early 20s. This is based on some profiling. It's also based on sort of the generation of people that seem to be in that crowd. And so that's something that we don't know for sure. But that is a belief that they were a few years older than Julie. And this was common, in case you're wondering, for a junior to be hanging out with 20 something year olds. I certainly did it myself. And, so we just all kind of hung out in a group and it included people of different ages. And there's some people who kind of never grew up and kept sticking around with younger and younger crowds. Um, so Robin says, I just watched an episode of 48 Hours and there were a lot of similarities to Julie's case. They ended up solving it through genetic genealogy. Hopefully, if nothing else, maybe they can eventually go that route. I agree, and that's why it's huge that this DNA is being tested, because if there's a link somewhere, that could be huge. It really could. And if it's not to somebody that is on their list or in CODIS or whatever, that next possibility is a real possibility too. A lot of cases are being solved that way now, and it's kind of neat that we have that. Jessica Peel says, if they went to smoke, I would bet they went down Beaver Dam. That's interesting. I don't know, Jessica, was that the known thing to do down that way? Daisy Lane's also pretty private. It's hard to imagine her wanting to go on that long of a drive, but again, once she was in the car, she may have been stuck in the car. I don't think that she wanted to ditch her friends, and I think she probably was worried about it, and that might be why this all happened, because she was like trying to get out of the car and they were trying to subdue her and mad that she was trying to get away from them. It's hard to say um, what happened. Which direction was the car in when the witness saw them on Daisy Lane? They were facing 193. So that's an interesting detail. They were facing 193 when they were seen there. So that would have been the direction that would kind of bring them back on the path home. That would be where they throw out their IDs. Um, okay, so sorry, I'm looking at the comments. So Caitlin brings up no purse and a taken house key points to robbery for me. So we have reason to believe her friends actually had her house key because they went to her house to pick up her stuff before picking her up. Um, so I don't think it was a house key. The purse thing, robbery maybe, but she had money in her pocket and she had jewelry that, the police do not think robbery was a motive. Um, but the purse, there's a lot of theories on that. Did they throw that out somewhere too and someone saw a purse and was like, oh, dang, I got me a new purse? Was the girl in the car and be like, well, that girl doesn't need her purse anymore. I'm going to take it. That'd be pretty bold. But, I don't know. But with her having money on her, they thought, um, um, they thought that it wouldn't be a robbery. Casey says, speak up, PG. We know more. That's why we're here. We want people to speak up. We want someone to be willing to share information. There's no detail that's too small. I have a spreadsheet that I keep a lot of information on, and it's exhausting. It's an exhausting spreadsheet, but every so often it comes back to help me remember some little detail, and maybe something someone told me a year ago matches up with something someone tells me today, and it opens my eyes to something new. And so that's just something that I keep to, uh, you know, to get, keep track of everything. Oh, Sarah says no, she won't name names. Plus, the people have information that comes forward. It's better if they don't mix up their info with other witness info. One of the reasons I'm not going to name names is safety. Another is defamation. And we talked about that a little bit. Unless I know something to be true, for sure, I'm not going to speak up and say names. But also, I don't want to hamper an investigation or even confuse matters. You may have a piece of information that tells us something different than what, the information that we have now. And I don't want it to be, I don't want to narrow it down into something significantly without exploring every option and considering every piece of information. And Cornelia said, but if they were on Beaver Dam, why wouldn't they dump her body there? It's even more secluded than Daisy Lane. I don't know. I in the beginning of all of this, I used to put my mind in that of their minds and try to think, what would I do if I were in a situation, and what kind of person would I be if I did this? Even just where her body was left. You know, some people go through great lengths to hide dead bodies. In fact, I think if you imagine trying to commit murder, that might be one of the hardest parts because you now have like at least 150 pounds of, human flesh to somehow get rid of. And they just were like, plop, right there, no care in the world. And, we had evaluated Ken Main's show before, and he had some profiling stuff, and some stuff I agreed with, some stuff I didn't. He didn't have all the information at his disposal. But, he talked about the people doing this really had nowhere to be, nothing to do. It's a Monday night. They're cruising around doing this stuff, it was March, so it would have been dark fairly, by the time they picked her up. And, if they're the people who were in the Red Jetta seen all around the parking lot for the 2 hours before she disappeared, they were just hanging out. They had nowhere to be but hang out in Greenway Shopping Center, blasting their loud sound system in their beat up old car with a spoiler on it. So, I think about that and I'm like, there's a mentality there. Maybe they want to get their shoes dirty, trekking her into the woods somewhere. Maybe that was just the moment where, okay, we, oh shit, this all happened. Now we need to get rid of her, get out of here. And that was just the moment that they stopped. And if you're taking Beaver Dam and you're going through all these back roads, and then you come to Daisy Lane, you pull over, you drop her off, and you go up to 193. But are you going to go back up? Are you going to go, if you're taking the back roads, are you going to go turn on 193 with a dead body in your car? There's a point in time where you say, okay, I'm done. Then we talked about them, cutting her throat um, after dumping her on the side of the road. And, we've had the theory of this is insurance, that she's not going to, if they're not sure, they don't know how to take a pulse, they don't know if she's alive or dead, what are they going to do? They're going to try to make sure she's definitely dead. But there's another theory of masking it to make it look like something different, like a targeted hit or something like that, like, just to confuse and foil the police or something like that. And the only reason I don't think it's that, well, two reasons, but the biggest reason is I don't think these people were thinking that hard or knew that much. I don't think that they were experienced. I think that's something that, um, you know, would be somebody who's like, you know, cared, cared not to get caught. Let me confuse things. They didn't care not to get caught. They just, I don't know what they cared about. They just dumped her on the side of the road. And maybe they didn't know how DNA worked back then. It was very new. But the other reason I think that they did it to hide their identity is, again, I don't think these people are all that bright. And I think that they wouldn't know if she was dead or alive at that moment. If her body was still warm and they didn't know if they could tell if there was a pulse or not, maybe she had gone unconscious before and woken back up. What were they going to do? What if she did wake back up? I think it speaks to the fact that they probably knew her and knew that she could identify them. And, the stupid part about that is if she did wake back up at that point, um, it would have looked pretty bad, but she at least would have been alive and it wouldn't have been as bad of a charge. So, it's, again, we're not talking about people who are thinking that far ahead. Um, but they probably believed she was dead, but just wanted to be 100% sure. Um, so Renee says, I think someone with a bad temper, and things got out of hand. Uh, that I could agree with, and that's why I talk about abusive men and the relationships that women have with men who could have been involved in this. If you've had a guy do anything to physically harm you that fits those descriptions, come forward. You know, there's, you know, there's usually patterns to the behavior. That doesn't mean everyone winds up dead. Maybe you see coldness and rage, but they never actually attack you. Um, because maybe, you know, there wasn't just that right moment. We don't know what the ingredients were. Somebody commented to me the other day that a lot of people were smoking PCP. Maybe when they're not on PCP, maybe they're not a murderer. Maybe they're just a woman abuser, or are kind of cruel about stuff. But maybe on PCP they're a murderer. We don't know what was really happening there. But we do know that people in Greenbelt at that time were smoking PCP. And man, does it make people change. Let's put it that way. But I do think there's some consistency in behavior, even when you're on PCP. That maybe just comes out. I don't think that like a perfect saint just went and committed murder because they were on PCP. So, couldn't Sarah says that she thinks they were going to take her further from the road until that witness drove by, and so they abandoned and drove off. That's a real possibility. The witness didn't specify who she saw in the car, so she didn't really see anyone in particular because it was dark. She just saw that their lights were on, the car was on, and by the side of the road, that could have been some serious ducking going on. So, that's something to think about. Margot says it could have been someone with, a bipolar disorder. That's a real possibility. Um, someone who snaps at the drop of a dime. Maybe they're pleasant half the time, and then all of a sudden, boom, they've got a cold, dead look in their eye, and they're ready to cause harm. I've seen that from someone who's bipolar, so it definitely can happen. Um, Jill says narcissistic people don't like to be rejected, nor do they think much about consequences or details. So think about those types of personality types also. I agree. I mean, chances are good if you're someone who does this kind of stuff, you've got some sort of issue like this. It doesn't mean that you go around murdering people. If you've ever followed other cases like Ted Bundy, he had a girlfriend most of the time that he was killing other people. Um, and he was not specifically horribly abusive to her. Um, but what's interesting is when they started talking about a random guy driving a buggy, she called in and was like, that could be my boyfriend. What? Something in her gut told her that something was off and that could be him. And she's actually the reason he got caught. So that's why I say, break the loyalties. If you were abused by a guy, you think it could be him, well, who are you protecting? Who's that guy? Not someone good, obviously. Um, I wonder if someone who knows something but is afraid to come forward now for fear of being charged for not saying something earlier. Um, no, I don't think you would be charged for not saying something earlier. I think this is, a very different kind of case, and cold cases function differently. Um, but I also don't think that that's the detective's goal in this. They want witnesses who can come forward. Um, there might even be an opportunity for one of the people who was in the vehicle who, you know, maybe the driver of the vehicle who didn't do it, to speak up and say, who did it, so that they are, you know, protected, really, because I think that that's, a real possibility, that they could be protected, um, you know, enough to be a witness. And yeah, that would suck. But, when there's starting to be DNA involved and things like that, um, it's just something to think about, you know? And, you know, I think that um, most people only know little bits and pieces of information. I think there's a few people who are scared to death and know more, and it probably eats them up a little bit. And, maybe they're worried, but the police, you're small fish. The police, the homicide detectives aren't worried about that at this point in time. Um, um, sorry, just, and he was a narcissist. I don't know where that came from, but I just noticed it, and I clicked on it. So one of the things that came up was the sexual assault angle. There was no signs of sexual assault. Um, it, it could just be somebody with a sadistic nature. I do think there's a a personal slant to that type of crime and a need to dominate. So I do think that that's a real possibility. Anyhow, we're getting close to about an hour and 40 minutes, which is a long time. And I think my cheeks are actually kind of like warm from, I don't know, I'm just warm. Um, um, Jill said that Ted Bundy was a narcissist. That's what I meant. It is true. There's a mask that some people can wear, and they can be the sweetest person in the world, and they can charm maybe 5% of the people in front of them, and everyone else can see behind the mask. They're all over here, and they're like, "Damn, that person's wearing a mask," and they can see the evil in their eyes. But the people who they don't want to see it won't see it. And it's all about who do you want to trick. And it's actually a pretty well documented and common thing with um, um, you know, narcissists, psychopaths. There's a psychopath interview once I watched that basically talked about how he would ingratiate himself with his neighbors by like helping mow their lawn and picking up their mail, when they're out of town so that he could have access to their children as a predator. So, but he was like, cute little face. He looked like Paul McCartney from the Beatles. And he was just this unsuspecting, horrible predator. And he was very delightful about how he, tricked them and stuff. Um, so somebody just shared a story about a woman murdered in 94 in University Park. A few years later, a man confessed to having killed her when he was 19. He was schizophrenic. Yeah, I mean, there's a real possibility that there's some sort of personality disorders here. And the one thing that really stood out to me, and I've talked about this before, is the crime against Julie just seemed so controlled to me. There wasn't a whole lot of other injuries. It was very focused and intent on strangulation. She was bound and she was strangled. There was some marks on her body from being dragged, and maybe her nose hit the ground. I don't know, if they dropped her or something, but that was what the police surmised. And so all of the actual specific intentional acts done towards Julie seemed very functional. Um, Tying her up was a functional thing to do. Strangling her without any other things, biting, sexual assault, significant beatings. They had a knife, and the only thing they did with the knife was after she was dead, they slit her throat. They didn't stab her, do anything, extra, extra. It just seemed very controlled, and I just focused on subduing her and overpowering her. I think this person likes to control and probably enjoyed in some way having control over Julie. And we don't know why. And when we talk about the credit card thing, that could have just been an excuse. If that was even part of it. You know, um, because it just seems like kind of a weird thing to do. Um, so anyhow, I think that I'm going to wrap it up. I don't see any other comments that are specific to this case. Thank you so much. Please talk to the people you know. Again, this is like, everyone knows everyone in the Greenbelt social scene. Maybe you know some people. I encourage you to talk. Just be careful about what you hang your hat on in terms of rumors. Don't make assumptions. Maybe who you've always thought it was isn't who it actually is. And open your mind and think about who you know, what they drove, what they look like, what they wore, do they sell weed, some of the stuff we've talked about. And there might be other factors that we didn't know at all that might be worth telling us. So please come forward if you can, either to the detectives or if you're more comfortable talking to me or someone on the Justice for Julie page. You can do that. And thank you again and good night.